So today marks 6 years since my conversation on mental health in the modeling industry with Nigel Barker.
It goes back to being the artist and not caring what everyone thinks about what you say. And even if people are saying, I don't like it, it's not for me, if your heart is in the right place and you're just showing what you think is right, then there's no real wrong to that. I did 17 seasons of that show, and we had an audience of over 100 million people.
My name is Aubrey Ebony Williams. I do have a master's in marriage, couple, family counseling, but I also call myself the model counselor, where I use my degree to provide mental health guidance and coaching to models. Which is why Nigel Barker agreed to do a live to discuss modeling in the mental health industry. Watching the America's Next Top Model documentary has me seeing the show through a very different lens. I feel like Nigel Barker has remained authentic, kind, and warm-spirited. I present to you a Love Lab special featuring a conversation with myself and Nigel Barker. Listen in.
Hello. Hi there. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Very well.
So, first and foremost, I am thoroughly excited to be doing this because you are iconic. And I know you know that, but I just want you to know that you are unbelievably iconic.
You are very sweet. Thank you very much. I'll take it. I'll take it. You know, when someone says something like that, it makes you feel very old at the same time.
Oh, no.
But I'll take it. I'll take it.
It's not old. It's just that you're seasoned in the industry, and I really appreciate you doing this with me.
No, it's my pleasure. Good work that you've been doing. I've noticed what you're up to. I've had to look at your sites. I see what you're doing, and it's important. And you know, you've got good things to say, and I'm happy to contribute. So thank you.
Thank you. It's like almost okay. Got it. So hi, I'm Aubrey Ebony. I am a print model on the east side of the world. So I have representation in New York. I have representation in Georgia and in Florida as well. I've done a couple of campaigns with Revlon, a Revlon product, and I was top 35 in Sports Illustrated Swim Search during their first gathering of the competition. So I have a couple of things under my belt. But this is not about me. This is totally about you, and I really want to get to know you from a different perspective, because I think a lot of us know you from America's Next Top Model, but you're so much more than that. And I just want you to kind of give, for the people that are tuning in, more of an idea of who you are outside of the show.
Wow. Okay, that's interesting. I mean, look, I'm quite happy to be known simply for being the guy on Top Model, quite frankly. Oh. But look, I think just to sort of dial it back a bit. I mean, a lot of people, some people may know, some people don't know my history exactly, but I actually started my career as a model as well, right? So late 80s, there was a show in England called The Clothes Show, which was a similar show to sort of an America's Next Top Model, but it was more of a general fashion show with designers. You can imagine Project Runway meets America's Next Top Model. That's kind of what the show was like. And they ran a modeling competition. And in 1988, 1989, I entered the competition as a young kid, 17, 18 years old. I didn't win. I came in the top 3,
okay.
But I got a modeling contract out of it nonetheless. And it was televised. It was on TV in England. And I went on to model, right? So this was early 90s. And for the first 5-6 years of my instead of going to college, which was what I was meant to do, I ended up being a model, traveled the world, lived in Milan, lived in Paris, lived in New York, it was very different back then.
Yeah.
And it was, I'd never really dreamed of being a model. I'd never dreamed of being a photographer. I enjoyed photography. It was a hobby, but the whole world was very different. You got to understand, there were no cell phones. Forget about Instagram or Facebook. We didn't have cell phones. Right, we were the era of fax machines, if you can believe that, and beepers, right? So I would go to my agency and fax my friends or fax my girlfriend somewhere else in the world and tell her, and then she would go to the agency waiting. Has someone faxed me? Has my boyfriend faxed? And that's how you would correspond. And I would literally call my girlfriend, who is now my wife, once a week on a Sunday, just to touch base, because that's when calls were cheaper. And so it was a very, very different, the communication aspect changed the industry a lot. Like the way we can communicate, right? Look at us right now, right? We're not even in the same place. We're talking, like all of these sorts of things were just unheard of. So the industry was quite different. You would go somewhere as a model, you would land in New York, you would land in, Paris or Milan, and you were sort of very fresh-faced, you'd hit the streets and no one had really seen you before, and you know there was no you were like brand new, like fresh meat in a way. It was like, who's this new person? You know, now people can have a sense of you because they see your social media. They can look at you getting up in the morning. They can look at you doing your exercise routine. They can look at you what you had for brunch on Sunday with your friends. You know, they see all your favorite everything. It's the research is there, right? So the mystery has changed a lot. You know, what's the mystery behind the industry, the mystery behind the models, you know, and some of that is both good and detrimental, right? There's mystery is always quite sexy, mystery is always quite fun, and if you lose all of that, you know, you lose that, right? So, you know, I basically was involved in model for that at that period of time. It was the era of the supermodels. I modeled with, you know, the likes of like the sort of Naomi Campbell. I worked with Christy Turlington, Nigel Ormond, Linda Evangelista, very few other people, and lots of other models, but specifically with like Chanel and things like that at that time. And you know, then things changed. Heroin chic, grunge, androgyny, and I'm a big guy. I'm 6'4". You know, I played rugby. I was the farthest thing you can imagine from being androgynous, and I was like, okay, this isn't going to work. I'm not going to be the waif model, you know. But I had spent 5-6 years working in the industry. I built up a client base. I liked it. I enjoyed it. You know what I loved? I loved all the weird people. I loved
and there's a bunch of weird people in the industry. So
yeah, but they're the weird people, and I realized that I'd never fit in anywhere. You know, like
I feel the same.
You know, I grew up in England as a kid who was I'm of Sri Lankan heritage, right? So Sri Lanka, a small island off the coast of India, part of the English colonies. My mother had come over from Sri Lanka with my grandmother and my aunt in the late 60s. She was a Miss World contestant. And I'd been brought up as a sort of Anglo-Indian, if you like, child in England. But as a result, never fit in because the Indian Sri Lankan community never accepted me because I wasn't dark enough and I wasn't Sri Lankan enough. And the English community didn't accept me because I wasn't white. So I was this sort of, I was one of the very first we call them half castes, which is a horrible expression, but it means you're half one and half another. And that's what we were called. But it was new then. In the 70s, it was unusual to be mixed blood. Now, of course, it's much more common. But I remember when I first went to New York and I saw these beautiful sort of children and adults, which were half black, half white, black people with blue eyes, you know, brown people with green eyes, like all colors. It was like who are these people? Like, where are they from? Because we didn't have that in England. That it was not happening, right? We didn't have that melting pot.
Than there, you know, with how you looked. Okay.
Oh, much more so then. You know, at that point. Now things are different. London is a lot more cosmopolitan. But back then it was a lot more separate. It's more like a salad bowl. All the ingredients are there, but they stick together in their own pieces. New York was like soup. It was like, you know, so those things have changed, right? And that's why I fell in love with New York. I'm like, New York is home for me. New York is the place because it was the one place where I went where people they listened to me and they went, oh, you're English, because they heard my voice. They didn't look at the color of me and thought, well, you don't look English. You're sort of light brown, tan, caramel, whatever.
Kind of a mixture of some stuff.
And that never sort of went across anyone's mind. So that was interesting. So I made New York my home. And when the industry changed, as I mentioned, I knew I had to do something. And I'd always been taking pictures. So I transitioned into being a photographer and a test photographer, shooting models at that point in the mid-90s. Wow. And it took me about 3 or 4 years of being a hardcore test photographer, testing models in Milan, Paris, London, New York, for all the agencies before I got my first big break. So that's how I got to where I am, right? Sort of basically being a photographer.
I mean, I had no idea. We wouldn't know this, you know, this stuff about you. I think the most we can do as like regular people is Google, and the information we find might not be accurate. So to hear that you started off in a modeling competition, you know, in the 80s in the UK, Europe, London.
Correct.
And then, you know, how different diversity was and what it was looked like back then compared to now. Now I feel like we embrace, you know, the different looks. We embrace the androgynous. We embrace the big, you know, the freckles, the vitiligo. We embrace all these differences. And it's so interesting to hear how the industry's changed. And I do like that because it gives more people the opportunity to try to do something like this compared to before where it was so streamlined. So, you know, thank you for sharing that because I had no idea that was your journey. So I really
I wasn't even allowed to tell people that I was from Sri Lanka or India, actually, because there was no work for Sri Lankan and Indian models. It was as if Sri Lankan and Indian people simply didn't buy fashion and didn't buy beauty products. So, and I know this is familiar too in the black community you know, in the US, where there were very few products for people with black skin, you know, in the beauty industry and stuff like that, that it was really white makeup that was darkened and tanned and not really formulated for black skin. And, you know, I remember even in America though, when I first came, they would say Macy's or so-and-so is doing a casting and they're looking to be multicultural and they're looking for someone who's Chinese, someone who's or Asian, someone who's Latin, someone who's white, and someone who's black, right? So those were the options. You could be black, you could be white, you could be Asian, or you could be Hispanic. And I didn't look, because I'm half. Yeah. I didn't look like I was one or the other. So there was no half mix, right? It wasn't just like, we're going to book you because we like you. You had to fit a genre or a type, or you know. And so they would say, you look most like Hispanic. So tell people you're Latin. And I'm like, what? But I'm not. And they're like, just go with it. So you have to go in and sort of people would look at you and go, tick the box. And, you know, you tick the box that you were going for the Hispanic role. And it was just weird because, you know, I realized I fit into that because I got booked multiple times. I did campaigns for all these people, but I was being booked oftentimes.
Quote unquote.
Yeah. I mean, I used to have long hair. You got to understand.
Yeah,
I look like sort of the Fonz or something, or John Travolta, people say. But it was that was the kind of look I was going for at the time. Hence, I shaved my head to become a photographer and move away from the modeling look.
No, I mean, that's, you know, I find that industries are doing that less today. And tell me if I'm wrong, you know, you really had your agencies telling you not to tell people you were from Sri Lanka, you know, and try to fit into a category, you know, like how tough was that for you during that time in terms of like, you know, you were young. So it's like still figuring out kind of who you are, what you want to be. And you have so many different people telling you that, oh, you don't be this because we don't accept that. Pretend to be this. So, you know, did that impact you in any way?
Oh, yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I think it's, you know, this was a very pivotal time in not just the modeling industry, but culturally for the world. I think, you know, there was it was, and I think that going back to communication and travel, it was when all of that was sort of exploding. It was when travel was becoming cheaper. It was when, you know, more flights were available across the Atlantic and quicker and you know, accessibility, and people were moving throughout Europe. It was when all of a sudden, you know, the internet was booming, email became a big thing, like all of these sorts of ways where people realized they weren't alone. When people realized and they could do research and they weren't afraid of other cultures, or they realized the beauty in other cultures, and those other cultures also represented dollars, right? So let's get back down to the nitty gritty. It all boils down to money. And if you know, one of these countries, one of these cultures has the money to buy and one thing, then all of a sudden, you know, the actual companies that are making the products just go, okay, we need to advertise to them, right? So when there's enough of you, then you become a market share, and at some point the balance was tipped, and there were enough of us that wanted and demanded and needed, and we weren't being represented. And all of a sudden, someone went, wait a second, yeah, we like you, we need you, we want you. And, you know, the fashion industry is very interesting because it's often pivotal at helping to shape those moments. You know, we get a lot of criticism in the fashion industry for being, you know, for being blamed for, because we're the face of what you often see in things. But also, it's that risk at that moment of an art director, creative director, an editor, a fashion designer, you know, of a model putting themselves out there, and, you know, and I say putting themselves out there, but they can also be criticized, or they can be belittled, or they can be made fun of, or people can poke a finger at them for being plus size, for having a skin illness, for having a disability. It's like, it takes a lot of guts to be out there and say, I'm beautiful and I'm happy and I'm going to be, I want to represent. Like, there's a lot of people out there who are very mean and very awful who will say, God, look at you. What are you doing? You shouldn't be doing that. You're this, you're that. You're too big, you're too small, you're too fat, you're too wide, you're too this. It's like, and I wrote a book. It's called The Beauty Equation. And it's specifically about finding your inner beauty and realizing that if you push your inner beauty out, that is actually how you become your most beautiful person. And there is nothing beautiful about perfection, actually. We are the sum of our imperfections. And it is all those elements that tell our story, our human story, and radiate through our eyes and our life and our soul. And that, when you look at someone and you look at their eyes and you gaze into them, that is what is the most beautiful thing you'll ever see. That's the most captivating. That's what the essence of charisma is. And if you want to be a successful model, that is the answer. I mean, and to joking aside, on America's Next Top Model, we talked about smizing and things like that, and we would joke about it. But there was so much truth in the concept of your eyes telling the story, your eyes being the window to your soul, and your eyes being what you love about someone, you fall in love with that person because you look past everything else. You look into the person's eyes and you look into who they are as an individual, and that is what you fall in love with. And that is the most powerful aspect. So oftentimes when there have been models who are unconventional, people are like, originally they sort of reject them. Even if it's a Kate Moss. I mean, Kate Moss, when she came along, right now it's easy to say, well, someone like Kate Moss, she's gorgeous, right? Yeah. But when she first came around, a lot of people were like, what? She's tiny. She's flat-chested. She looks like an alien. She's like a child. She looks weird. She's not a model because she wasn't curvaceous. She wasn't buxom. But it was a knee-jerk reaction at that moment where people were anti the 80s, they were anti-money, they were I'm not getting out of bed for less than $10,000. They were like anti all of the sort of luxury and excess and over the top of what was happening in the late 80s. And she represented this anti-fashion, heroin chic, androgyny, like,
love it.
I'm me, take it or leave it. A bit like Twiggy, in the 60s, which was like, if I want to look like a boy, I'm going to look like a boy. If I'm going to look like an alien, I'm going to look like an alien. But I'm a girl, but I don't care because I don't have to tell you that I'm a girl because it's none of your damn business. I'm just me, right? And that was very much like, for a lot of people, an affront. But that's what fashion is capable of. We're capable of slapping ourselves across the face and the world across the face and taking a complete right turn in what beauty can look like and changing and shifting. And she was representative of that moment, so interesting.
No, I love that. I mean, as I watch the industry develop and grow more, the idea of even, like you said, Kate Moss or Twiggy just being different and being in the forefront, take me as I am, accept me for who I am. It reminds me of a model today by the name of Slick Woods. I don't know if you're familiar with Slick Woods.
I'm not.
So she's
I will be.
An American model. It's okay. She's like the new school, quote unquote. But she's similar to the concept of Winnie. Winnie Harlow. Slick Woods is bald. She has a crazy gap. She has freckles, all these tattoos. But it's just the idea of really being confident in who you are and letting that inside shine out, so people can see that we're not industry standard, but there's so much beauty, there's so much opportunity, and opening the industry to allow something like that. And I love the idea that it's been a historic thing. I mean, we're more culturally inclusive now in terms of Black, Polynesian, people with disabilities, different things. But back in the day, it was people like Twiggy, people like Kate Moss that are like, hey, I'm different. I still fit the industry. Look, I'm just different. And we've just progressed so much. And so I love to hear old school stories, new school stories, because they all intertwine. And I think at the end of the day, we all have the same goal, or they all have the same goal of wanting to be a model, be successful, and then show people that I can break these norms. And so, I really love that, because even today, one of my questions I'm going to ask you is that there's so many models or aspiring women and men who want to be models, and they don't fit industry standards, they don't fit industry norms. And I was curious as to how you would give them insight or, just advice on what to do as an aspiring model that doesn't fit an industry norm today.
I mean, look, unfortunately, the only real advice is to tell people to believe in themselves. And it's the same even with photographers, to be honest. I mean, I get asked by photographers to look at their work all the time, every day. you know, and models as well. I mean, it's probably, I don't know, hundreds of people a day tell me, you know, can I look at their work? Can I edit? Can I have, tell me if they're good? Can I tell if they're good enough? And it's, I'm like, God, you know, I'm not the authority to tell you that you're good. I know that you may think I am, but, and I have an opinion, right? But it is an opinion, and it is my opinion. And I'm very appreciative that you like my opinion and you care about it. And it is, you know, absolutely, it's valid as far as what I think works, right? What I think works. But it's, you have to, it's the language, right? It's very, very specific. It's what I think works. And the world is varied, and the world is, you know, has so many options. And the reality is that things taste different in different people's mouths. People see things in different ways. People appreciate different things, you know, and that's fantastic. You know, that's the wonderful thing. But, you know, if you try and cater to other people, you lose your art, you lose your style, you lose your personality. And, you know, and it's a very, very hard thing to tell someone, because, you know, if you look at fantastic artists historically, and this isn't much solace, by the way, unfortunately, but if you look at someone like a Van Gogh, for example, one of the most celebrated artists in history, he unfortunately didn't sell any work ever, literally, in his entire life, other than to his brother. But now we all recognize him as being brilliant. Now, like I said, that's not much solace to people, but the point is that if you're an artist and you're really true to yourself, you don't turn around and say to someone, how's the picture? Do you think it's finished? Do you think I should add a little more blue in the corner? What do you think? Should I add another daffodil? You know, no, I think this is, you know, or you just finish your work. As a photographer, you have to take a picture. You have to know when you've got it. It has to make you happy. You happy. Not everyone else, you. And then if because you've got your finger on the zeitgeist, people will love what you're doing. People will go after you. As a model too, you know, it's a part of like being just yourself. If you're powerful, people are attracted to that. They're attracted to success. They're attracted to power. They're attracted to confidence. They're attracted to care, kind, love. You know, there are things that when you get that dynamic cocktail of all those things coming together, that is what chemistry is. That's what being charismatic is. It's sort of the ability to look at someone and have empathy, to have, you know, there's an element of, you know, you see yourself in them, even though they're 100 times different. They can be the opposite of you, but you see yourself in them. You know, and it's not you see yourself literally physically there, but you see the same type of person, you see who you want to be, right? And that's where being a role model is so important. And you'll see so many people, models and celebrities and various people in general in life, you know, who really are more role models than anything else. They stand for something, and by standing for something, that is actually the new face of fashion. That's really the new face of beauty. It means that you have a heart, you care, the world is bigger than one small thing, and that, you know, that is in fact the sexiest, most powerful tool in your toolkit. So if you really want to get out there, stand for something, mean something, have a cause, have a foundation, you know, make a difference, and that is what's going to attract people to you. And then they're going to want to copy you. They're going to want to be like you. They're going to want to wear what you wear. They're going to want to smell like you smell. They're going to want to eat what you eat, do your exercise routine, do all the things you do, because they want to be you, right? And they're going to find you attractive. You know, if you look at actors, there was a very interesting thing. Actors took over from models in the sort of 90s, 2000s on magazine covers. Okay. And they became, you know, they were on the covers, and models really sort of lost traction for a while there. And in large part because models were just known for being beautiful, and actors had personality. Actors you could see in a movie, they could play roles, they could play parts, and that was exciting. And I think that, you know, the world started to demand actors rather than models, and so they were appearing on magazine covers, they were appearing on fragrances, they were doing advertising campaigns, they were being booked by the designers because they could morph, they could be who. And also a lot of these actors and actresses, you know, they're not necessarily model, if you want, model perfect or model pretty, but that doesn't matter because we found them more interesting, we found them more exciting because they were like real. Then of course social media came along interestingly enough, actors, a lot of them at the time, didn't embrace social media in the way that models did. Models were very comfortable being photographed and photographing themselves and all that, and we're happy to showcase the behind the scenes. Happy to showcase them getting up in the morning, going to the gym, showing their life, which is what we all wanted to see. And actors didn't, because they like to play a role, but then their private life was their private life. So that didn't resonate with social media. So it was another flip of that, what happened. And models rose again to the forefront and went back on the covers, became famous again, started doing all the fragrances, and actors and actresses dropped down. And now it's a bit more of a mishmash as everyone's got more comfortable. But it's very, very interesting to watch that evolution happen.
That's okay. So I feel like we have a similar thing happening here today with influencers, and how influencers are becoming the forefront of a lot of products, a lot of branding, a lot of marketing, because they have influence. And so I find that it might even be parallel to like when actors kind of took over from models, and just the difference, because actors offer something different, just like influencers offer something different. Models, I feel like we're visual, and yeah, we do commercial acting and things like that from time to time, but for the most part, it's just a visual. While influencers today have such an impact because they've grown up a name for themselves just with their personality, similar to how actors portray themselves. And so I love it. I just feel like it all comes full circle. And you mentioned something earlier about just really being true to yourself and like sticking to like what you want to do in your art and being confident in your art. And I wanted to, tell the people that are listening, when I started doing this and when I really got involved in the modeling world, I was trying to be something completely different than what I am today, because I was trying to fit a mold. My hair was different, the amount of makeup I wore was different, my networks were different. But once I realized like who I was and what I wanted to project, it completely changed like the kind of work I got and the confidence and how people look at me now, because they see like, oh, Aubrey, she's confident with wearing her hair like this. And sometimes my hair might not be the best because of whatever thing, but I still rock and I stay true to me, my image, how I want to portray myself. And I think people have really like gravitated towards that. And so, being somebody who's, I guess, started from one point, saw that this wasn't what I wanted to be, and transitioned my art to being confident with my look now is like tremendous. So for those who are listening, stick true to what it is that you're trying to do. Don't try to seek approval from someone else. Really double down on who you are. It's going to be the best way to get what you're trying to get out of this industry, because if you're trying to duplicate something that's already there, but there's so much room for growth and there's so much room for newer things, that please don't be afraid to be yourself. Like, I definitely double down on that, and I love being myself. Nigel, like, if you knew, and not that I'm anti-extensions, but I was so ashamed of my hair, Nigel, because natural hair, it's a newer trend for the last 2-3 years. But prior to that, having natural hair wasn't a thing. Like, people would wear their wigs and things like that because we were ashamed. And now, I've gotten to a place where I'm like, this is my cut. It's good on some days, it's not, but the clients love it. I love it. I feel so much more confident being myself. And so for those out there listening, definitely be, comfortable and being yourself, because Nigel's talking about how it's helped models, grow and find their place. And it's definitely helped me find my place. And I feel like I'm talking in circles, but
no, it all makes sense. And look, it's easier said than done to have that faith and belief in yourself.
For sure.
And we are oftentimes brought up to second guess who we are and how we look, and that we feel that we don't have what it takes, and that we feel that inadequate. And it's all very unfortunate, but the reality is that those of us who are able to either not care enough about those aspects and see a bigger picture, or realize that our worth is not necessarily skin deep, and that it is, it comes from a deeper place, and it comes from our actions more than our words even, right? And that, one can wax poetic about anything, but you have to actually walk the walk and do it and live it and push yourself through. And, I wrote another book called Models of Influence, that is really about, for me, what I thought was the essence of what it meant to really be a supermodel. And it was about models who had changed the industry throughout history, who had stood for difference, who had revolutionized the business and what beauty meant. and what physicality meant, and also from a business standpoint, you know, whether it was, you know, getting the biggest deals done, and not saying, you know, not accepting rules, and not, you know, kowtowing to the big beauty companies, and just going along with what's being done. And there have been some incredible models, whether it's someone like Cindy Crawford, and, you know, even an Elle Macpherson, and, you know, people who took gambles on the industry and created their own lines and their own, you know, capsule collections and their own. Now, of course, it seems normal because people have done that, but they were some of the very first models to ever do it. And it was a revolution at the time. It was a huge risk, paid off handsomely, but no one knew that at the time necessarily. So it was a massive risk, and it also pushed them away from other clients. And when you do something like that, you know, you put yourself out there on the limb. And ultimately, that's what it really means. If you're going to be a success, you have to be willing to go out on a limb. You have to be willing to put it all out there, and the rejection may well happen, and you may have to that may happen simultaneously to the actually being embraced, right? But you have to be singularly focused and not really care. It goes back to being the artist and not caring what everyone thinks about what you say. You have to be able to edit yourself. You have to know when you've got it right. And even if people are saying, I don't like it, it's not for me, or that's bad, or that's wrong, if your heart is in the right place and you're just, you know, showing what you think is right, then there's no real wrong to that. You know, it's like, that's you, that's your opinion. And, you know, if it does jive with what's happening in the world, then it will all come together. And it's a curious thing. It's weird when sort of all things sort of come together and it's absolutely right. I mean, with America's Next Top Model, none of us realized what we had with that show when we first did it. I mean, it was
so much of an influence.
It was such a small show. We were on UPN. We had a small budget, and we used to do it. And it was a bit of fun, and, you know, and it took off. It went gangbusters, and we went from a small show on UPN to #1 show on primetime on, you know, CW, and we went on. I did 17 seasons of that show, and we had an audience of over 100 million people around the world. With you know, we circulated it in syndication in 146 countries. You know, so it was a massive country. We were a bigger show than Baywatch or Sesame Street when we were on, right?
Really?
As an international show. So the franchising rights were massive for that show, with 56 versions in different countries and everything else. You know, so, you know, and I've done it all over the world now in various different formats. So it was an incredible success, but it was also a risk, and people in the industry really weren't very nice to people like Tyra and a lot of other people who were on the show, who they said, and myself included, who they said had sold out, that this wasn't fashion, that it was over the top, that it was an exaggeration, that it was silly, that it was, you know, like, you guys are making a mockery. And what they didn't like was the fact that we would open the doors of this sort of exclusive club of fashion, and we were showing people how it was done. We were welcoming in the masses, and we were saying, yes, you're beautiful. Yes, you can do it. We believe in you. You're the diamond in the rough that we've been looking for. Let us help you. Let us teach you. Let us give you some polish, and look at this amazing, beautiful girl who used to be a cashier at Dwayne Reed. Look how amazing she is. And people were like, oh, this is not sexy. She's not the model. She doesn't have the manners. She doesn't have the this and the that. And we're like, well, we don't care. This is what we're doing. And if you watch, Top Model started with the sponsors were, you know, I mean, they were great. Thank you for being our sponsors, but they weren't high fashion, right? And the judges, they weren't from Vogue. We came from like magazines like Jane magazine, and we had editors from, you know, magazines that you hadn't really heard of, and we had sponsors like Kmart and Walmart and what have you. But by the end, it was Italian Vogue. We had designers like Missoni and, you know, big designers coming onto the show. We had Andre Leon Talley, editor-at-large of American Vogue, one of our judges. Vogue was not in vogue when we started. They should have realized that this was where it was at, but they weren't. They were so slow to the party that they didn't figure it out until we were like season 12, right? So that's when we apparently became in vogue, which, you know, was the opposite. Our actual highest ratings were seasons 4 through 8. So they actually came on after the fact. So they really missed the boat, but they realized too that whilst they thought that we weren't, you know, cool enough at the time, our ratings were so high and their magazine sales were going so low that they realized that actually we were more in vogue than they were, right? Wow. So they were jumping on our bandwagon. We didn't need them, they needed us. So it was very interesting how things changed. And it's So I take my hat off to people like Tyra, who's put herself out there, and she's always been 100% committed, and she really is there producing that show. In that show, she's not just talent; she's always been the executive producer and was 100% committed. And whether you appreciate or whether you like what she says, or whether you agree with what she says, is really neither here nor there. It's her show, and she's doing it.
Yeah.
So it's like very easy to criticize, much harder to do. And so I always tell people, stop talking and start doing.
Yes. I feel like, first of all, every time you speak is like a wealth of knowledge, and I seriously like super grateful. But the show America's Next Top Model, it created such an opportunity for us to get an idea of what the industry is like, or at least how we perceived it, because that's what we saw. I mean, you see the fashion shows, you see the ads, but you don't really understand what goes down in the industry until we watch that show. And so it's interesting that people didn't receive the show well, because I would have never known that. I just knew the show to be this big opportunity to discover new talent, to discover people that might not have been discovered otherwise.
So the masses thought that. So the world thought that. The viewers liked the show. And that's why we were a success. But the industry was quaking, because they were the ones who were freaked out, because we were taking away their shine, if you like. We were exposing. We were it was like a behind the scenes. It's like, here, have a look behind the curtain. You can see our secrets. It was like they felt like it was like we were like a magician giving away the tricks. Here's how you do it, right? But they didn't realize too, though, was because again, this is before Twitter, it's before Instagram, before Facebook. It's when we started, 2003. So they didn't know what was on the forefront, right? So this was, as soon as social media came out, it just exploded, because reality television was really a forerunner for social media. Reality television was the behind the scenes of life on television, right? So you could watch people, the train wrecks, everything happening, the behind the scenes, the making of, the documentary. That's what reality television was, all wrapped up into one, and hysteria and craziness, and and then basically social media came along, and it was like, now everyone can do it. You've all got a platform, you've all got a channel, go do it, right? But a lot of the magazines and people like that didn't see that, didn't know that was coming. So they were like almost indignant. They didn't want to see it. They were like, stop saying that, stop doing that. Fashion is, modeling is really going to a studio and it's a white wall and you step. I'm like, yeah, sure. A lot of shoots are like that, but we're a television show and we're going to show you the greatest and craziest and most creative photo shoots that we can think of, and they may involve hanging from the ceiling. They may involve tight ropes. They might involve, animals and fast moving trucks and God knows what we're going to do with you. But it's also fun and entertaining. And the reality is every single one of those shoots was taken from a real shoot that had actually happened historically. So they weren't just made up, imaginary crazy stuff. It was all real stuff. It was just, we were doing it also to create an interesting show. And that was, part of it.
I loved all the different fun, the photo shoot concepts were amazing, but it also showed little things that really happened. I think there was some dietary stuff or health stuff that some of the models went through that was real world stuff that models actually experienced. And so, it's been such a long time since I've watched certain episodes, but I remember I don't know if a girl fainted because she wasn't drinking enough water because of whatever, just little things. And I also remember one time, I think it was when you guys were trying to shoot in the little telephone booths in London, and I think you guys wanted the models to shoot nude. And even there was a model who was like, I'm super Christian, I can't shoot because it's against my, religion, against my beliefs. And just how, even little incidences like that really gave you insight on what the industry could be and how she navigated it, was beautiful. How you guys, handled it, was super beautiful. But I love that the show really gave all these different facets, from casting processes to, what it looks like when you need to, do your makeup on your own. If you don't know how to do your makeup on your own, professionalism, preparation, getting from one place to another, because cell phones weren't a thing. So understanding how to use your time wisely to get to a casting or to get to an audition or a gig. I think the show really gave us an amazing blueprint or outline of what the industry could be. And it's sad that the industry is so exclusive? That's a better word for that. Exclusive, sorry, forgive me. They're so, exclusive to the point where it's like a clique. It's an industry. It's a group of people that don't want to let people in. And, you know, when I think about that, I feel like that's one of the things I want to change. I would love the industry to change. It's just more inclusiveness. And so, you know, are there any things about the industry that you would like to see change that, you know, that hasn't changed over time? Or do you feel like we've done enough change? Like, what are your thoughts on industry?
I mean, you've never done enough. There's never enough, right? It's never enough change, so to speak, until everyone's happy. And then ultimately it's always morphing. What I am proud of, though, is the fact that the fashion industry has the ability to change and morph, and I've seen it happen, right? So I've been part of that. Top Model was a pioneering show in trying to, change the face of fashion, and it had been and has been very successful at doing that. And absolutely pivotal in so many models who wouldn't have necessarily had a chance having a chance. So I think that there are big changes that have happened, and since I've been a model and become a photographer and been in the fashion industry, which is now almost 25 years, I've seen complete shift in the type of model, the type of the business, the type of opportunities, the type of travel, where people can go, where people are coming from, what's acceptable, what's not, the kind of products. And there's a much larger range of what's possible now. So that's great. Is there still the cookie cutter? Yes, but the reality is that it is also, and this is the real part of it too, and people often get this confused. One of the reasons why models are 5'9", size 2 to 4, have a size 9 foot, all this sort of like, if you like, perfection, but it's not so much perfection. It is the fact that it's a sample size, right? So a lot of designers and people, when they make clothes for the first time, they have to make it in a sample size to try it on, right? So it's, what is that size? And they kind of years ago agreed on what that size would be. And it was a 5'9" model who was a size 2 to 4 that had a size 9 foot. And that is basically like what the sample of everything was made in. So when they did a fashion show and everything, everything was made in the sample size, and they would only ever make 1 or 2 of things, and you had to fit into it in order to wear it, because they couldn't afford to make 100 or 1,000 because they hadn't sold it yet. So it was simply that. It wasn't so complicated or so prejudiced that it was like, we're anti everyone this, or anti everyone that. It's quite expensive for a designer to go out on a limb and say, I'm going to do all my sample sizes in a size 14 or a size 0. Even a 0, you understand that the models who were really slim, they also couldn't fit into the size 4 to 6 sometimes. That was because they were too skinny. They didn't have the boobs to fit. It kind of went both ways. Obviously, it was far worse off if you were a full-figured model, because they really weren't catering for you. And I remember myself saying how amazing it would be if a designer took a risk and really designed clothes in their sample sizes for real women and real people and full figured. I'm 6'4". I'm 230 pounds myself. I'm not really very easy to get clothes off the hook either. Maybe when I was a young model, I was much slimmer than I am then, but I was a young guy. Now I do work out and do all these other things, and it's not easy for me. But as a result, these sample sizes don't make sense. And I feel that, that is changing. And hopefully with technology and the cost of making samples in different sizes, we can see runway shows really, where we have a proper cross-section of society walking down. Because if you're a good designer, you should be able to create clothes that look good on real people, because that's who's buying your clothes, not models. They get it for free, right? So, we're, really designed for people. And that's what I want to see change.
Nigel, Jesus, that was beautiful. When you know that agencies and industries have a standard, you just know that they have a standard. I had no idea that the standard came from a sample size. I had no idea. And so, it comes it makes me think of exactly what you said of today, how designers need to be creating clothes for the people that are actually buying it. When you do these fashion shows, when you put on Swim Week or Fashion Week and you're wanting these clothes to be bought by people, the people that are modeling the clothes are nothing like the people that are probably going to go out and buy it. The people that are in the clothes are in a bracket of people, such a particular bracket. And I genuinely had no idea that the size came from a sample size, which historically, like you said, I think is changing. We have plus size models that are now that are now being accepted into the industry that are now on runways. Not as much, but we're getting there. But even the idea of designers, if you're a true designer, being able to design clothes that fit the everyday person, because that's ideally who you want to buy your stuff. That's who's going to buy your stuff. The real people, real humans, real.
But even the plus size models that we have, to be honest, are sort of perfect plus size models. Right?
I agree.
Right. So everything is measured perfectly. It's like just a bigger version or a smaller version of what the sample is. Right. When reality is that, you know, I might have big shoulders, but I may have a narrow waist. I may have a pear-shaped body. I might have narrow shoulders. I might have a big neck. I might have big ankles. Like the reality, we all come in different ways and shapes and sizes. And I think that, you know, obviously different designers design for different body shapes and different body types, and that's fine. I think that's great. I think it's also good that you find a designer or you find a style that works for you, and then that's a part of it. But each designer, I think they need to also understand that if that is who they're catering for, then to make clothes that fit for all types of people within that genre or type, so that they can really, it'd be good for them too. It helps them monetize their position and have a following and people who love them and appreciate them, because, you know, it works. I mean, you see that with certain, every now and then there will be a jean or an outfit or a top that people are like, this rocks because it fits everybody, or it works, you know, and people just are buying it en masse. And it does happen, but there's been so much emphasis on sort of perfection and average, and, you know, it unfortunately comes from the bottom line, which is the dollar, you know, which is how much it costs to do. And I think, though, that with the way things are changing and with the way technology is changing the garment industry and fast fashion, there's really no reason or any excuse anymore to not be able to create more sample sizes in more shapes and sizes, so that we can actually, you know, give everyone the opportunity to look their best and feel their best, which is really what fashion should be doing.
I don't know why people have not already done that. As long as we've been doing runway shows, as long as modeling has been a thing, you know, it sounds like, you know, we still have so much growth to really get to and get through. And it's so interesting that we're still stuck in this idea of trying to create a norm for something, a perfected idea. You know, when you said that we use plus size models, but still a perfect plus size model, you're so right. It's still the 5'9", 5'10" plus size girl who has the hourglass type of figure. You're not thinking about the girl who has a different shape or different proportions, you know, because we still are chasing after norms. And I think that
and also age. Don't forget age.
Oh my God. Totally.
Right. So it's not just the shape and the size, but it's the age, right? So, you know, women aren't beautiful because they are in their 20s, by the way, right? And I would, you know, my wife is 45 and has never looked more beautiful in her life, and she's had 2 children, and her body's never looked more amazing, in my opinion. And, you know, and the reality is that, you know, it's the strength of the mother, the power of the mother, the power of the woman, the strength that she has. These are all the things that are incredibly attractive and incredibly powerful. And, you know, that's what we should be looking for. And we should be dressing and representing women like that, you know, of all ages, all the way up to our grandmothers should be out there, because these are people buying clothes. You know, women don't just buy clothes in their 20s or 30s. They buy their clothes. Well, your mother wants to buy clothes. Everyone wants to buy clothes. And they want to be seen, and they want to be known, and they want to be, you know, represented. And all this has to change. Look, Aubrey, unfortunately, I have to go at this point. I've got another meeting right after this. I have my own podcast, The Shaken and Stirred Show, which I record every day. And it's coming up after this. So I appreciate you. Good luck with everything that you're doing. Good luck in the fashion industry. I will be following you and looking at what you're doing, and maybe we can chat again sometime in the future.
6 years later, I'm reminded that standards will always evolve, but self-worth has to be chosen. Thank you for listening in. If you enjoyed this conversation, please subscribe. I dive into a lot of things: self-worth, self-love, relationships, and all things healthy here on Aubrey's Love Lab. Thank you for tuning in, and I will see you on the next video.